Trenton Gray was no stranger to lonely nights. As a janitor at the Appalachian County Courthouse in northern Georgia, he worked the dusk-to-dawn shift, tidying courtrooms and hallways after the crowds and staff had departed. The courthouse, built in the late 1800s, was a grand structure with towering columns and a dome that loomed against the moonlit sky. By day, it bustled with the tension of trials and legal proceedings. By night, it lay silent, old floorboards creaking underfoot, the distant hum of fluorescent lights echoing in the corridors. The building's main foyer featured a statue of a woman clad in a flowing robe, blindfolded, holding a sword in one hand and a pair of scales in the other. Lady Justice, the universal emblem of law and fairness. She'd stood there for over a century, her marble features chiseled with serene dignity. The hallway lights revealed her faint expression, stoic, regal, and watchful in her blindfold. No matter how many nights he spent cleaning that foyer, Trenton never gave the statue more than a passing glance. It was just another fixture in the old courthouse, like the squeaky doors or the cracked tiles. That changed one humid summer evening when the building's hush took a peculiar turn. It started as a routine shift. Around midnight, Trenton roamed the second-floor offices with his mop bucket, humming to himself. After emptying trash in the judge's chambers, he headed for the main foyer. A wave of fatigue pressed on him. He was halfway through a 12-hour shift. He looked forward to finishing so he could get home, microwaving leftover lasagna and falling into bed. As he swept near Lady Justice's pedestal, the overhead lighting flickered. The building's wiring was old, and surges happened often enough that he rarely batted an eye. He resumed sweeping, listening to the whispering hush of the nighttime courthouse. Then came the faint scraping. It was like something sliding across stone, a gentle rasp. He paused, ears pricked. The hallway was empty. The escalator was turned off at night, the offices locked, the small museum corner cordoned. Might just be a rat, he whispered. Mice and rats sometimes scuttled in the walls, or maybe a loose piece of metal had shifted. He resumed sweeping, but the sound repeated scrape, scrape, closer this time. He turned, scanning the marble floors. Nothing. The overhead bulbs flickered again. Then it dawned on him that the noise might be coming from the statue. He peered up. Lady Justice stood as usual, blindfold intact, sword lowered at her side, scales balanced in the other hand. The stance hadn't changed, yet his skin prickled with an indefinable sense of being watched. He forced a laugh. Long shift, Trent. You're hearing things. He flicked off the overhead lights in the foyer, leaving just the emergency lamps on. The statue's face receded into gloom. The next night, the image of that scraping noise clung to his mind. He told himself to focus on the tasks at hand, but a kernel of unease remained. As 2 a.m. approached, he ended up near the foyer again, vacuuming the corridor. The building was silent, his vacuum's low drone echoing. When he finished, he flipped the vacuum off, letting the hush flood back in. The overhead fixtures flickered once more, that faint buzz of electricity dancing through the air. He glanced up at Lady Justice. Instantly, alarm bells rang in his brain. Something was off about her posture. He couldn't pinpoint what, just an odd shift in the statue's profile. He inched closer, pulse quickening. Her head was angled slightly to the right, as if she were listening to something. The tilt was subtle, but he'd cleaned these floors every night for years. He knew the statue's original orientation. The head had always faced straight ahead, blindfold unwavering. Now the marble chin pointed a fraction downward, the entire sculpture seeming to lean. If he hadn't been so familiar with her, he might have missed it. But no, the statue's head was definitely cocked at an angle. Heart thudding, he reasoned that structural shifts or the building's foundation might cause an old statue to shift. Perhaps the pedestal was uneven, but the effect was eerie, as though she'd turned her ear to overhear his footsteps. He forced an uneasy grin, rubbing the back of his neck. All right, that's enough for tonight. Time to move on. But as he left, a shiver traced his spine, like a gaze trailing him from behind. He resisted the urge to glance back, telling himself it was pure imagination. Over the next week, The building's ambience felt heavier after dark. Trenton grew jumpy. He found reasons to avoid the foyer, focusing on the upper floors or the basement storage rooms first. But eventually, his chores forced him to pass Lady Justice again. Each time he half expected some new shift in her posture. On a stormy evening, thunder rattled the courthouse windows. The lights flickered more often, briefly plunging halls into darkness. Trenton rolled his cleaning cart into the foyer, flinching at every crack of thunder. The statue loomed in the strobe-like bursts of light. He spotted something on the floor near the statue's pedestal, tiny chips of marble or plaster scattered like shards. Kneeling, he picked one up, frowning. Where had they come from? The statue looked intact at a glance. Then his eyes fell on her hand that held the scales. The index finger, previously molded onto the scale's chain, was slightly parted now, as though releasing the chain. A hairline crack outlined the finger's new position. It seemed that the statue's finger had moved. Lightning flashed, and for an instant the statue's blindfolded face seemed to tilt more. He jerked backward, nearly dropping the marble chip. The thunderclap that followed boomed like a gavel. He told no one. Who would believe him anyway? An old statue fracturing or shifting over time was plausible. But the sense of purposeful movement haunted him. That night, he barely slept. Dread curled in Trenton's stomach as he clocked in the next evening. He dreaded checking the foyer, but couldn't ignore his duties. After finishing the top floor's offices, he forced himself to the main corridor. No flickering lights greeted him now. Just the hush of an old building. He turned the corner and froze. In the muted glow of the overhead lamps, Lady Justice's head was turned more than before, angled slightly to the left, and her blindfold, once tight across her eyes, now sagged a fraction, revealing a hint of stone eyelid. The scales dangled precariously from her half-loosened grip, and the sword's tip seemed an inch closer to the floor than usual. Breathing unsteadily, Trenton approached the pedestal. He noticed fresh scuff marks on the marble base like her feet had scraped the surface. A swirl of dust or fine gravel lay near. The effect was that she had shifted her stance and left marks behind. He circled around, photographing the changes with his phone. As he snapped pictures, a wave of shame hit him. He felt silly, a grown man spooked by a statue. But the evidence was in front of him. She was not in the same position as the day before. He climbed the nearby balcony for a vantage from above, snapping more shots. The statue's face, partially exposed by the slipping blindfold, formed a half-smile that gave him chills. Then his phone blinked a low battery warning, though it had been at 80% earlier. He sighed, pocketing it. The overhead lights flickered ominously, as though reacting to the tension. He hurried off to finish the rest of his shift, casting anxious glances back. That intangible sense of her gaze followed him all night. The next few nights offered no reprieve. Each shift, Trenton found new signs of movement. The sword's angle changed, the blindfold slid further, the statue's shoulders twisted fractionally. The sound of scraping recurred, sometimes behind him, sometimes above. One night, as he was mopping near the clerk's office, he heard a low whisper echo from the foyer. Heart thumping, he tiptoed toward the sound, water sloshing in the mop bucket. The whisper ceased. He flicked on the foyer lights. Lady Justice stood there, head cocked. The lamplight cast a sinister silhouette. Nothing else seemed out of place. Then came a sudden gust of air, or so it felt, that ruffled the hair at the back of his neck. "Who's there?" he called, voice trembling. The only response was the faint hum of the overhead lights. He retreated, unsettled. The courthouse at night had become a stage for intangible presences, overshadowed by that statue's silent transformations. Trenton finally confided in the security guard, a weary man named Johnson who spent nights monitoring the cameras. They pored over the footage from the foyer's camera, which pointed at the main entrance and partially at the statue. The recordings from that week glitched whenever the statue was in frame. The image stuttered or flickered with digital artifacts. Johnson frowned, complaining of outdated equipment or a loose cable. Still, they found no clear movement of the statue. Each time the feed jumped, the statue's position changed in the next frame. It might be an inch or two difference in the sword's tilt, or the head's angle, but no continuous motion was ever captured. Johnson rubbed his temples. This is too weird. Could be an electrical interference or a software bug. Trenton forced a shrug, but the knots in his stomach tightened. The statue was messing with technology, it seemed. He convinced Johnson to keep an eye out for real-time changes, but each time Johnson checked, the statue was still. Only when no one watched would it shift. The idea unsettled them both. Meanwhile, the courthouse bustled by day with a high-profile trial involving a local politician accused of corruption. Crowds gathered, tensions ran high. The blindfolded statue ironically symbolized justice in a place overshadowed by scandal. Trenton observed the swirl of attorneys and reporters, feeling a private sense of dread about the nightly strangeness that no one else seemed to notice. He overheard the district attorney's remark, "Justice is blind, but we sure hope it's not swayed by illusions." The words felt strangely resonant, though Trenton doubted the DA knew just how literal those illusions might be. The statue's transformations accelerated. One night, Trenton found the blindfold hanging off her temple, exposing both stone eyes. They were carved in a classical style, unseeing yet unnervingly lifelike. Another night, the scales had tilted so drastically it appeared she was about to topple them. Her sword arm rose slightly as if ready to strike. He documented each change on his phone, though the pictures sometimes came out distorted. Some nights the phone's memory card scrambled the files, leaving only static or half a photograph. Even the ones that survived seemed to show the statue's face in different emotional states. Serenity turned to smoldering anger or hidden contempt. Yet the official line was that the statue was just an inanimate piece of marble. Johnson grew increasingly uneasy. He found large gaps in the security footage periods of black screen or repeated frames. Each time it resumed, the statue's posture was different. He tried to fix the camera or replace it, but the new hardware glitched the same way. One morning, Trenton visited Johnson in the security office. The guard was pale, stammering that the entire night's footage was corrupted, except for a single snapshot at 3:07 a.m. He showed Trenton the frame. Lady Justice's face turned toward the camera, blindfold gone, her stone eyes staring directly into the lens. The corners of her mouth twisted in an almost human grin. The shot was pixelated, but the threat in her gaze was unmistakable. How is that possible?" Johnson whispered. "She's not supposed to have that expression. It's carved marble." Trenton swallowed hard. This was no random glitch. Something was controlling the statue, or perhaps it was alive in a manner no one could explain. The building's century-old corridors harbored an entity that now manifested through marble. Then one Monday morning, chaos erupted in the courthouse. Staff arrived to find the pedestal empty. The statue was gone. The floors around it were marred with deep gouges, as though something heavy had slid across them. Chunks of marble littered the foyer, forming a bizarre trail that faded away near the side exit. The side exit's door remained locked from the inside, no forced entry. No sign of where the statue had gone or who moved it. The entire building swarmed with law enforcement. The statue was historically significant and publicly owned. News crews arrived fueling rumors of a brazen art theft, but no alarms had tripped, and no camera captured thieves hauling the statue away. Instead, the footage from that night was thoroughly corrupted solid black for hours, except a single frame at 2:16 a.m., showing the statue gone from the pedestal. Another at 2:17 a.m. revealing nothing but an empty corridor. It made no sense. The staff was baffled, the police suspicious. Trenton watched from the sidelines, uneasy. Deep down, he doubted any human had physically removed that statue. He suspected the statue had left on its own. Days passed with no break in the investigation. The police questioned the staff, including Trenton, who hesitated to mention the moving statue. He guessed they'd label him delusional if he claimed the marble lady walked away, so he kept it to himself, offering only that he'd heard odd noises and noticed cracks. The lead detective looked unconvinced, but had little to go on. Late one evening, rummaging in the boiler room for cleaning supplies, Trenton found a small chunk of marble on the floor. Its shape resembled part of the statue's robe hem. Oddly, it was sticky with a dark residue. He picked it up gingerly, heart pounding. The residue smelled faintly metallic like iron, or old blood. The moment unsettled him so deeply he nearly dropped it. He hid the fragment in his locker, uncertain what to do. If the statue was gone, Why linger in the courthouse? Something about that leftover piece suggested the statue might still be connected to this place. Perhaps it roamed at night, an animate sentinel of twisted justice. Desperate for an explanation, Trenton dug through courthouse archives. He found references to local legends, the building's constructor, a stonemason rumored to have used eccentric rituals. An old news clipping from 1901 recounted how the statue was originally delivered from Europe, rumored to be cursed. Another anecdote described a caretaker who vanished without explanation decades prior, leaving behind scuff marks near the statue's pedestal. The caretaker was never found. Trenton grew convinced that the statue's disappearance was no mere theft. He read about myths of stone effigies that come to life under certain conditions, old Celtic or Greek tales of inanimate guardians awakened by injustice or blood. The idea felt ludicrous, but less so than the notion of thieves carrying a half-ton statue in the middle of the night with no trace. Tormented by the possibility that the statue might still roam, he decided to stay overnight after his shift, hidden in a closet near the main foyer. He wanted to see if it returned. This was risky. He had no official reason to remain and might get in trouble, but curiosity and dread compelled him. Armed with a flashlight and his phone, he settled in the cramped closet, ignoring the swirl of dusty files around him. The courthouse closed at 7 p.m., and by midnight the place was dark and deserted. Time crawled. He dozed off briefly, startled awake around 3 a.m. by a scraping sound echoing through the corridor. He emerged quietly, stepping into the gloom. The overhead lights were off, but the emergency lamps cast a faint glow. Down the hall a shape moved. His heart nearly stopped. It looked like the silhouette of a robed figure gliding, sword tip dragging across the floor scrape. Scrape. The figure advanced in slow, purposeful steps, each movement producing that bone-chilling rasp. Trenton's legs wobbled. He flicked on his phone camera, though the footage might glitch. He advanced stealthily, each footstep feeling painfully loud. The silhouette turned, revealing the faint reflection of pale stone. Lady Justice indeed. She wore no blindfold now, her eyes presumably wide open. Her scales hung at her side, sword in the other hand. She paused as if sensing him. Terrified, he ducked behind a pillar. The statue resumed moving, the scrape of the sword echoing. Where was it going? He followed at a distance, adrenaline pulsing. The statue drifted toward the main entrance, each step eerily fluid for a being made of marble. Trenton glimpsed her face in the emergency lamp glow. The carved features seemed even more lifelike. The corners of her lips lifted in a slight grin. Her stone eyes flickered with a cold, predatory glint. He stifled a gasp. The statue pressed a hand to the glass door. The lock clicked open as if responding to her presence. She stepped out into the night, the door swinging silently. Gathering every scrap of courage, Trenton followed outside, heart hammering. Night air enveloped them. The city beyond the courthouse was quiet, 2 or 3 a.m. with few cars. Street lamps lined the sidewalk. The statue glided across the steps, sword leaving faint scratches on the stone. Trenton realized she was heading toward the street that fronted the building. Was she leaving for good? He stood paralyzed, uncertain whether to alert police or try to stop her. Suddenly the statue paused under a flickering street lamp, turning her head slowly. Her eyes locked onto him behind the colonnade. A jolt of raw fear pinned him. She raised the sword, pointing it in silent warning. The polished blade reflected the lamp's light, glaring in his eyes. The message was clear: follow me no further or face consequences. Then, as a truck rumbled by, the statue moved on, disappearing around a corner. By the time Trenton dared to dash after her, she was gone. He stumbled back into the foyer, mind reeling. She was real, animate. How could he explain this to anyone? The next day, the police demanded to know if he'd learned anything. He mumbled about suspicious activity, but gave no details about a walking statue. They found no fresh footprints or scuff marks outside. The building's external cameras corrupted. No help. Local news speculated that art thieves had stolen Lady Justice. Some claimed an inside job. The case ran cold quickly. Johnson, the security guard, avoided discussing it and soon resigned, citing stress. Weeks passed. The courthouse staff replaced the missing statue's pedestal with a simpler display. Life moved on. But Trenton remained haunted by the memory of that living marble figure. He began scouring the city's security cameras, hoping to glimpse a stone shape wandering at night. Nothing. He wondered if she'd truly fled or was lurking somewhere preparing to return. Then, early one morning, a courthouse IT technician asked him to help check a glitch on the system. Sorting through old backups, they found a single hidden file from the night the statue vanished. This file resisted deletion or changes, labeled in random code. The technician cracked it open. It contained a single still image. Lady Justice standing in the courthouse foyer, her face turned directly at the camera. Her blindfold was gone, revealing blank but intense stone eyes. The grin on her lips was sharper, almost mocking. The scale in her left hand was broken. The sword in her right glinted with an unearthly sheen. The picture's metadata read 4:04 a.m., the morning she disappeared. The rest of the footage was corrupted or missing. A chill flooded Trenton. The statue had personally left behind that final frame as if to say, "I see you." The technician pressed him for an explanation. Trenton shook his head, backing away. He burned the file onto a flash drive just in case. Then he left the building, not returning that day. Though the statue was gone, the courthouse still felt overshadowed. Staff whispered about ghosts, about that final frame. Some insisted they heard faint scraping at night in the building's corridors. Others claimed to see glimpses of a robed shape in reflections, though it vanished when confronted. Trenton found it impossible to continue working the night shift. He requested a transfer to a day maintenance schedule. Management granted it, not minding. He felt safer in the daytime crowds, though he never truly relaxed. The sunlight on the empty pedestal felt hollow, as though the statue's presence still hovered, hungry for movement. Over the next months, rumors circulated around town. Someone saw a suspicious woman-shaped figure near an abandoned foundry at 2 a.m. Another claimed to have heard scraping footsteps in a deserted alley. Nothing was confirmed, and no official report matched a marble statue on the loose. But those who encountered something unusual described a robed silhouette that vanished into the night. Trenton tried to ignore these rumors, focusing on normal life. Yet he couldn't forget the statue's final glare. He sometimes woke from nightmares, picturing her overhead lamp flicker, her stone face leaning in. The dread felt inescapable. The Appalachian County Courthouse eventually replaced Lady Justice with a modern metal sculpture, far less imposing. The old pedestal remained in storage, collecting dust. Officials wrote off the original statue's disappearance as an unsolved crime. The security footage remained locked away, too corrupted to glean new clues, except for that single frame of the statue gazing into the camera. Trenton kept a copy of the photo on a hidden USB drive. Late at night, sometimes he'd study it, hand trembling at the memory. The detail in her eyes, the parted lips, the subtle shift in posture that suggested motion. She looked almost alive. He left the courthouse job soon after, moving to another county for a fresh start. But on certain quiet evenings, he'd spot a headline about a random statue found in odd places, or read an urban legend of a robed figure wandering Georgia's back roads. Then he'd recall the faint scraping of sword against marble floor, the electric flicker of overhead lights, and that grin meant for him alone. Wherever Lady Justice had gone, Trenton felt certain she was still out there. An ancient sentinel of law twisted into some restless shape, continuing her slow, silent movement under the moonlight. Perhaps like justice itself, she was uncontainable, wielding her sword in dark corners where cameras fail, searching for her next witness. Or maybe she simply walked on, bearing silent testimony to a cosmic scale no mortal was meant to see. No one can say for sure. But the corrupted footage, the missing statue, and that single haunting image remain. If you ever roam the courthouse halls alone at night, stay alert. A faint scrape might echo behind you, a presence leaning in to watch. And if you turn to see a robed figure vanish around a corner, sword dragging behind her, remember the story of the statue that moved and pray it doesn't stop for you.